you so much for having me. I'm always really astounded when people invite me to do anything, partly because, there's one of those practices you should do, which is always listen to your own talks. Do you do that?
Yes.
You really should do that, because then it gives you this sense of gratitude that anyone ever stays. Just have this overwhelming sense, if it was me, I would have left by now. It seems a very long time since I was commended for ministry at the, what was it called, the Ministerial Recognition Committee at Bloomsbury Baptist Church. And I had to sit in this vast hall, and then I went in to this room where there must have been, it felt like 100, there was probably 20 people sat around the table. Maybe I should say men. And no one introduced themselves to me, and I just had to answer these weird questions. And read a passage of the Bible out loud, I think, just to prove that I could read, or something like that. Anyway, all went well. And here I am, 31 years into ministry now, which hardly seems possible. Thank you. So we're going to talk together about navigating leadership. This is partly because whenever 10 months ago I was asked for a theme, I just chose one that I could interpret when I got closer to the event. Leadership in the orbit of church leadership and chaplaincy is arguably about two things: you and God. And if you think you knew that many decades ago, I'm not going to tell you anything that you didn't already know. Because leadership in the church and in the world of chaplaincy, being a Christian leader, is about you and God and the relationship between those two things. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that skills are really important and competencies and all of that kind of stuff. But fundamental to Christian leadership is about you and God, and I want us to delve deeper into that this afternoon and tomorrow. So you've heard my kind of CV. It's good to read it when you've written it and sent it in. You think, is that actually what I did? It's been an absolute privilege to be a Baptist minister. That doesn't mean that there's not moments when I've written my resignation letter. So far, haven't sent it. It doesn't mean that there's not periods where I felt like I'm hitting my head against a brick wall. It doesn't mean that there's not people I found it unbelievably difficult to deal with. And weeks when I felt as dry as dust, and sometimes very distant from the God who called me and sustains me. But it's an absolute privilege to give you a life for something that God has called you to and that fills you with joy and life. How many people get to do that? I really think it's important that we just recognise that this is an amazing honour for us to give our lives to something that lasts not just for now but for eternity. So important. And over these last years, since about 2006, one of the things that's been significantly important to me is having a spiritual director. So if it's all like cool to do that now, I've actually been doing that for quite a long time. And just had a sense in that time that maybe this would be something that God would draw me to do myself, but it never quite seemed right. And then, you know how God brings all the bits together and you just suddenly realise that, oh, this is it. And so just over a year ago, I began training in spiritual direction with an organisation called Sustainable Faith that works in America and across Europe, England, and it was their first in-person Scottish cohort. It had to be right. And maybe the key thing that has come through that, apart from turning me inside out and upside down, is the power of good questions. The power of good questions. There'll be a lot of conversations during these next few days, and they'll be about all manner of things, significant and insignificant. Some people you don't really know and you'll just have chitter-chatter, because that's what we do. And others you'll know deeply and you'll risk some things with them. You'll risk telling them about how you really are, what you really feel. And there'll be some people in this group who are just brilliant at asking questions. They just know how to go that little bit further, to ask that next stage deeper question, the one that partway in you go, I don't know why I'm saying all these things. Oh yeah, they asked me that question. That person. And of course we know the stuff about open questions and closed questions. And if you don't know that, maybe talk to me afterwards. We know that there are leading questions. None of us ministers would ever ask leading questions, would we? There are complex questions. By the time you've got to the end of the question, the person's looking entirely bewildered and says, sorry, could you repeat that? And in the realm of spiritual direction, there's particularly two types of questions as well. One is evocative questions. Questions that talk to us about our emotions, how we're feeling, what is stirring within us. And one of the things that I've realised is that for 30 years-ish, I've learned to not demonstrate emotion. I mean, you can tell me literally anything and I'll go, uh-huh, because that's what I've learned to do. I've learned to not look shocked, not look confused, not look anything, preferably. Not be overly emotional. I'm not really overly emotional. Not look overly emotional, try not to look underly emotional, just kind of have that calm thing. When somebody says, how do you feel? What's stirring in you when you have that conversation? What have you been left with as a result of leading the funeral for a baby of 6 weeks? Or leading the funeral for the second son in a family who's taken their own life? Or walking with someone that's been a key leader in your church as they've walked through cancer treatment and died? And you go, it's fine, I'm fine. What's actually going on inside of us? And the other type of question that is so important in this is the contemplative question. So what is God doing? I mean, that's the straightforward one, isn't it? What's God doing? So when I'm going through all this normal stuff in my life, what is God at work in? When there are the acute situations, what is God at work doing? When I'm filled with joy at what I see, what is God saying and doing? And that starts to take you into a deeper and more fulfilling relationship with the one who made you and who sustains you. And there may be a clear answer to those questions, or there may be a multi-layered answer, but it's the question that's significant. And the answer is in the power or control of the person who is asked the question. So if I ask you something, you can answer however you want to. You can ask me anything you want to, and I can choose how I get to answer. That's a really important part of this, isn't it? It's not manipulative, it's not forced. It just opens up a space for someone to talk about what they want to talk about. And so as I've been reflecting a lot on questions that I'm asked and I ask, and I recognise a good question, I'm increasingly intrigued and captivated by the questions that God asks. And that's what we're going to be looking at together over these next couple of days. And the first one, and I trust that you know this because you're minister types, is in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 8 and 9. And it says, "Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day." Don't you just love that image? I mean, like, I get to live on the east side of Loch Lomond. Outdoor of my house is 35 miles of forest. I struggle with that some days. I was brought up in London, right? The idea of the Lord God walking in the cool of the garden, I mean, that's, it's a little cool right now already, but on those summer days, and if you get up early enough, and you just go and your bare feet touch the dew on the grass, isn't that a beautiful image of God being present with us? And they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you? Where are you?" Well, here we are, 6 weeks into the new year. And this is one of those multi-layered questions, isn't it? Where are you? Where are you? Where are you physically today in this space? I wonder how you might answer that question. I mean, at this time of year, the general answer is tired. There's a general answer. But it's also an easy answer, and I don't mean that to undermine that might be the truth. But sometimes tired, a little bit like stressed or busy, it's like a catch-all. So how are you, really, in your body? Because, last time I looked, we were all embodied, right? And our bodies quite mattered. How are you in your body? What's going on? If you were to start at the top of your head, and I'm not going to go all weird on you, so don't worry. If you were to start at the top of your head and work your way down, what would you say? See, I carry all my stress up here. I struggle with migraine. I know what's going on with my body because I have a headache, and then it's worse than a headache. How are your shoulders? Where's the tension? I mean, no, I won't do that. Not yet, maybe tomorrow. Are you tense? Are you stressed? Are you holding it all tight? How are you feeling? Do you hold everything in your stomach? Is that where it feels weird to you? Phil was talking about starting boxing. I think that's a cool idea, by the way. I think hitting people for fun has to be a cool idea for a minister. How much attention do we pay to the bodies that God has put us in? Because that's how we exercise our leadership, is through our bodies, right? How are you doing mentally and emotionally? I put them together even though they're not exactly the same, because I think we experience them often the same. Some of us process emotions through our heart, some of us process emotion more through our head. Some of us are determined by the kind of gut stuff, and some of us more determined by our head stuff. How are you doing in that space? Are you thinking positive or negative? Anxious or peaceful? Are you feeling oppressed by what you're dealing with at the moment, or free? Do you feel sad? Or do you feel happy? Do you feel afraid? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel like you're flourishing and those are the emotions that you have around you? How are you doing? How are you doing? This is not an add-on. And how are you doing spiritually? Are you worshipping because we're singing a song and everyone else is singing? Or because it's coming from the depths of your heart as a place of thankfulness, of adoration, or even affirmation? I need to say these things and hold on to them because life is really rubbish right now, but if I sing, I hold on to these things. If I asked you to pray right now, would it be because you know how to pray? Or because it's out of an overflow of a conversation that you're having with your Father in heaven, day by day, minute by minute? If I invited you to share a testimony, a real one, like an everyday one, of what God has been at work doing in your heart, would you have something to say? And please don't hear that as a judgment. I've been lots of times sat in your seats thinking, please don't ask me anything, I have nothing to say. Is this a real, living, active relationship with God that we are ministering out of? Or has it become our learned experience that we know how to do? The busyness of life, the patterns of life, can often mask the truth or reality of how we're feeling. Lots of people find sabbatical really difficult. And it's because all of the patterns, they're all stripped out. All of that stuff that makes you feel like a good follower of Jesus, it's gone. You just get to be you. Now you might go, wow, you're actually a really nice person. I quite like you. But I like you more in sabbatical than I like you when you're being a minister. Slightly worrying that bit. Or you might go, I don't know what I think. I had one of my deepest crises of faith in the first few weeks of one of my sabbaticals. It was the year that Madeleine McCann went missing. And my own child, one of them, was almost exactly the same age as she was. And I'd been involved in Stop the Traffic and all the stuff around human trafficking. And so I was overly aware, maybe, of what might have happened. And because they talked about God and because they prayed, do you remember that? I kept thinking to myself, God, this is your moment for some great publicity. Like if she came back, then everyone would know. I was tired, I was weary. I wrestled with it. Just found myself in a really dark space there. Really just wondering, can I still do this? Do I still believe this? Do I still want to believe it? What else am I going to do? Where are you? One of my previous spiritual directors used to sometimes get me to do this exercise. He would ask me this question, and maybe this is something that you might have capacity for in these next few days, or even, potentially when you go home. And this is his question. If your physical, mental, it requires a level of imagination, people, right? If your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual self sat down together, and sometimes it can be helpful to even put 4 chairs in a circle and move yourself around the chairs, who would say what? Who would need most support? Whose voice would be loudest? And I suggest you get an actual piece of paper and an actual pen, because phones are really distracting. I know you can write your notes on a phone, but you can also look at Facebook, and you can also check your emails, and you can also notice that WhatsApp that's just come in. So I suggest you get an actual piece of paper and ask yourselves this: who would say what? Who would need the most support? Whose voice would be loudest? Because if you just create a little bit of space, you will know the answer to those questions. You will know the answer. And you've probably just been ignoring it because it's just sometimes too busy, isn't it, to do anything about it. Who would say what? Or let me use a slightly different model for you that might also help you to answer that question, where are you? It's a model that can be used with counselling. It's not hugely detailed, but whatever's shouting the loudest, people come and they say, this is my issue right now. You start on the outside. So I'm assuming that everything within this room is relatively confidential, okay? One of my colleagues is currently signed off with anxiety at the moment, and has been since the beginning of December. So when I sit down with him, and he's got all this stuff going on in the emotional sphere, and quite a lot in his head, and I say to him, tell me about how you're sleeping now. And he says, well, I've had 6 hours of sleep in the last 10 days. I know where we need to start, right? We need to start on the outside there. Because there's no point in talking about the fact that his view on reality is quite skewed at the moment, when actually he's had no sleep for 10 days. Do you get what I'm saying here? So it's physical. Then we talk about, what are the emotions that we're feeling? We might talk about what decisions are we making. So we make wacky decisions when we're all over the shop emotionally and physically. What's our mind telling us? And what's going on in our spirit? And then you start in the middle and you work back out again in trying to make sense of what's going on. But let's return to the story of Adam and Eve in Genesis. We tend to go, don't we, straight from creation to the fall. Right, God created the world, it was all really, really good, and then Adam and Eve messed it up. Okay, that's how it goes. And I started to wonder, what might it have been like for Adam and Eve before the fall? What words might characterize Adam and Eve's relationship with God before the fall, in those early days of Eden? Because this is what we were created for. This is what we were created for. We were created to be with God. Be with God. That's how we are wired, to be with God, to be in a relationship with God, our Creator. And the only way that we can restore that is because He came to be with us, so that we can be with Him. I don't know how you feel about heaven, but I feel pretty excited about it. I really genuinely do. I cannot think of anything that is more exciting than to be with God forever and ever and ever. To be in His presence forever. To be able to worship Him with the angels and the archangels and everyone from every tribe and tongue and nation throughout history forever. We were made to be with God, and they got to be with God. And it was their whole life. You know, they didn't have LICC then. They couldn't learn about it by doing fruitfulness on the front line. They just knew that their whole life was with God, was in His presence. They didn't have a spiritual life and a normal life, or a sacred life and a secular life. They just had life. And that life was lived in the presence of God. It was unbroken. Oh my goodness. Just so hard to even imagine, isn't it? To have unbroken, unfractured a relationship with God and with other people. Completely unbroken. No barriers, no prejudice, no misunderstanding, no judgment, no sin. Just amazing. Amazing to be in that space. And I guess that maybe is all summed up in this little word, isn't it? Intimacy. To know and to be known. Yeah, I think that's what everyone's longing for, really. To see and be seen. To be safe and secure. To be worthy. And everything is good. In fact, everything is very good. Then we have the whole talking snake fruit eating incident. And in that moment, the relationship is ruptured. Creation is fragmented. Their eyes are open. They realise that they are naked. They feel exposed. And they face a moment of vulnerability and a moment for vulnerability. And it's a risk that they choose not to embrace. Instead, they hide. What better place to hide than behind a couple of fig leaves? And they hide from God. God walks in the garden with them. And it says, the Lord God called to the man, where are you? Where are you? And as with all good questions, God's question invites a response. Occurs to me that He probably knew where they were. Anyone else think that? It's a little bit like when you play hide and seek with your kids when they're little. And they hide under the cushion on the sofa, don't they? And you're walking around going, are you behind the curtains? Are you under the chair? Maybe you're on the windowsill. Hope not, because I told you not to go on the windowsill. And eventually you go, oh look, there you are! Great excitement, the kid's really excited too. I think God knew where they were. I think He was inviting them to a deeper response if they chose it. Where are you? Where are you? Right, now I need at least 4 hands, which I actually don't have. have found an actual Bible, so that's exciting. You know, with that very small amount of luggage that you're allowed on the plane, the actual Bible had to stay at home. Verse 10, here's their first answer. I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. Shame. Shame is such a powerful emotion. I mean, it defines whole cultures, not so much the one that's in the UK, but it's still a powerful emotion. Shame, whether it's a disgust that we feel at ourselves. Shame is the things that are hidden and we hope nobody else will ever know about us. Shame and fear kind of go together because I get afraid that you might find out and then you'll know what I'm really like and then you won't like me anymore. Shame is a kind of pointing the finger thing, but it's kind of almost us pointing the finger at us. Shame. How many ministers crash out of ministry over the decades that many of us signed up for at the beginning because of shame? Something is going on in their life and they are ashamed to say anything to anybody. So the whole thing just becomes like this big monster, and eventually the monster eats you. Sometimes we're ashamed of things we didn't ought to be ashamed of as well. Maybe it's something that happened to us, not something that we did, something that happened to us. We carry it around like a burden. We hide. I'm afraid to come and show you. With this many people in a room, there are going to be some realities where some of you will be holding things that you feel ashamed about. Some of you may have a right to feel ashamed of them. They need brought in the light so that God can deal with them because He is a forgiving God who hears us when we call out to Him and say, I'm sorry, I've done this, help me. And who's able to take us and cleanse us and give us a new start. Some of you are carrying stuff that just needs to come into the light so someone else can say, this is not your burden to carry. You don't need to feel ashamed about this. It was never your fault. Let me help you with this. Let us carry this together. Let us seek God's healing through this. Shame is such a powerful thing. I think it's a real tool of the enemy because he holds us down in it. And the most scary, worst thing we can imagine is bringing that into the light. And all the while we can keep it in the darkness, God is not invited to be part of it and to help us to walk through it. The second thing in verse 12, the man said, the woman you put here with me. No comments. She gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it. Then the Lord God said to the woman, what is this you've done? The woman said, the snake deceived me and I ate it. He didn't ask the snake. Blame. Blame is such a huge thing, isn't it? It's subtle. Like sometimes I say, oh, I can't do because I'm too busy. Whose fault is that? Well, if you understood the dynamics in my family, it's a really tough church, the leadership. They're really hard, very judgmental, they don't get it. And it's so easy to blame. And again, how confident are we to bring these things into the presence of God? And they left in this place of vulnerability, covered by a couple of fig leaves. I don't think that protects you from God's gaze. Not really. But it's hard to be vulnerable, isn't it? If people really knew what I was really like. Sometimes we even say that to God, don't we? If I don't talk to God about it, He won't really know. I mean, we play all these weird games with ourselves. They found themselves in that space. Do you ever imagine how things might have been if they just fessed up? Do you ever think that? How things might have been if they'd come clean? If they'd taken the initiative to be transparent and honest? They said, well, God, it was like this. You see, I know you said this, but actually, well, she gave me some fruit, it looked really cool, and I decided to eat it, and anyway, there was a serpent, and he suggested it. We're really sorry. Can you imagine? Obviously not. Anyway. But instead of that, they turn in on themselves, and they turn out against each other, and they turn not towards God. They didn't turn towards God, who even in their nakedness and vulnerability and sin will still turn towards them. Isn't that amazing? God didn't just say, oh my goodness, all gone wrong. I'm going to walk out the garden, lock the gate, and they stay in there. He still went towards them. And they exchanged, didn't they, superficiality for intimacy. You know, they had been granted an intimacy with the God who created them, an unbroken, perfect relationship with him. And instead they went on having a little chit-chatter about the snake who'd come along and whose fault it was, and they just entered this relationship of superficiality. I have worried for myself sometimes that actually my relationship with God is entirely superficial. I hope that doesn't shock you too much. I came to know Jesus for myself when I was 11 years old, when said Stanley Voke was preaching about lighthouses in a children's service. And I said to my mum, is it okay if I become a Christian? I think my parents were probably quite pleased about that, really. And we sat in Stanley Voke's office and we read Journey into Life, because that's what you did then. And I gave my life to Jesus. I was passionate. About him. I'd read my Bible cover to cover by the time that I was 12 years old. I loved church, still love church. I was always pleading with my mum to take me to the evening service. Never understood that perhaps she just wanted some time with her friends and didn't want to take me. I used to get really upset with Stanley Voke because he'd miss out one of the verses from number 426 in the green hymn book, which was Anne Can It Be, and I loved it, it was my favourite, and he missed out a verse. I was a weird child, I'm still weird, right? But I was passionate about Jesus. But sometimes I still think that my walk with him has got superficial. It's got like a shell, you know, it looks all right. None of you would know. But I know. Am I being vulnerable with him? Am I walking closely with him? Am I dealing with the difficult things in my heart towards him and towards other people? Are we talking regularly about stuff and life? About marriage and our kids who do their stuff, and my team, my churches and my ministers and my friends. Mike and I, my husband, went for dinner with two other couples on Saturday night. One of them is a professional French horn player, and she now leads retreats with Herdwick Sheep. He's a professional violin player with the Scottish Philharmonic Orchestra. The other one is our Pilates teacher, who's an osteopath and is deeply into all that stuff. I was like, we used to have a lot of Christian friends. We have no Christian friends really anymore, but we have a lot of non-Christian friends now, which is great, right? Because is Jesus real?
Yes.
You know, is not that the most important place that we could be present right now, is with those people? Because if my relationship with Jesus is real, I can have an authentic reality about that and the way I talk about him. They exchanged superficiality instead of the intimacy they could have had. They also exchanged proximity for intimacy. So when I go to church regularly and I play in the band, which I do lots of Sundays, and when I hang out with other Christians, because that's my job, right? That's like proximity. That's not intimacy. How much is my identity wrapped up, my walk with Jesus wrapped up in my role and the amount of hours I spend in the church? And I realise for most of you that's an awful lot of hours. But is that intimacy in my walk with Jesus? Adam and Eve missed the point, as my friend Phil Knox once said. God is not mad at them. He is mad for them. He's not mad at them, he's mad for them. Maintaining that close openness with God is more than trying harder, isn't it? Oh, that was supposed to be different there. I'm potentially feeling ever more guilty. I want you to encourage each other. Who here has ever felt guilty that their walk with the Lord is not as good as it ought to be? Anyone felt they should have been praying more, reading their Bible more, being more loving, forgiving annoying people? This is about more than trying harder. This is a spiritual battle that we are in, right? I don't know that we talk enough about that anymore. This is a spiritual battle that we are in, where Satan's aim and intent is to separate us from God. Like, he has not changed. He has not changed. His tactics are the same. A little while ago, I was at a seminar by a Northern Irish guy called Ron Boyd Macmillan, I think that's his name, for Open Doors, who worked with the persecuted church. He was talking about the persecutor. Now, I won't be able to remember all his points, but the persecutor works in the same way. He sows doubt, he brings deception, he creates division and distraction. Eventually, he causes death. That is his job. Now, it's really obvious if you are a follower of Jesus who is based in North Korea or Somalia or Afghanistan. But these same tactics are true for this church in the UK right now and for you. His aim is to deceive you. Oh no, I'm not going to be deceived, I'm a Christian minister. Really? He says to Adam and Eve, he lies to them. He lies to them. Verse 4 and 5 says, first of all, she says, God says, you must not eat fruit of the tree that's in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die. Well, God didn't say that right anyway. You will not certainly die, the snake said, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. He lies to them. His aim is to deceive. When we end up on these kind of polarized spectrums of things, it's good because Satan's like, yeah, come on, follow that, follow those lies, that there's someone over there who believes something different from you, they're a bad and evil person. No, they're not, probably. They probably just have a different view from you. He's constantly trying to deceive us into different ways of thinking and being. He creates doubt in our minds. Did God really say? We know that. Probably most of you have preached sermons on it. He creates false memories in our minds of what used to happen or what might happen, and this kind of perfection that we might have had, or things might be different. I want to tell you this story, and I want to hear you to hear it without the baggage of the past 2 years, okay? We had a young lady came to us, the Board of Ministry we call it in Scotland. She's thinking about becoming an accredited minister. And she had come out of a secular, anti-Christian background, broken background, and had been in a gay relationship. And she had taken herself to a bridge in Dundee with an intent of throwing herself off the bridge. And she hadn't. And she thought, there's only one person I can speak to, and it was a colleague from work who she knew was a Christian. I don't think she even knew why she wanted to speak to this person. And this person took her along to church, and the church she'd taken her to was a very conservative church, Baptist church in Scotland. There's a lot of them, right? So she took her along to that church. And she came to Christ, and she has this amazing story of what Jesus has done in her life. And when we asked her a little bit about it, very sensitively in the interview, she just said, and her face was completely glowing, she said, I just cannot imagine why I would want to go back to that life again when Jesus has made me so gloriously free and given me the gift of a new life that's better than I could possibly imagine. I say, I don't want you to hold all the stuff from the last. That was her story. And she just glowed. And it doesn't matter what that particular thing is about, but so often I think we still think, is this the best life ever? Is this the best gift ever, that we might know Jesus and live for him? Or do we sort of think, oh, well, maybe it might be more fun to do something else that pays better and has less hours? And they disobeyed, and we make bad choices at times too, don't we? Somebody nod, because I'll feel better about myself. We do. We say the thing that we said that we'd never say. We have the attitude that we knew we shouldn't have, but it's easier that way. It makes us feel better about ourselves for a minute or two. Sometimes we make seriously bad choices. We break relationships and we hurt people. And we damage the stuff that's around us. Sometimes we make bad choices in the privacy of our own homes and the secrets of our own hearts. Because we fall into sin, temptation. And it seems like a good option from time to time, just like it did to Adam and Eve. And then there's division, and they get divided from each other. And I don't need to tell you anything about that, because we all know what that feels like, don't we? Arguments, difficulty understanding other people's points of view, fighting and strife and warring. If we don't see it in ourselves, we see it so often and sadly in our churches. Conflict, and eventually they're thrown out of the garden. God is always whispering, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Parker J. Palmer said this: the human soul doesn't want to be fixed. Sorry for those of you that are fix-it type people. The human soul doesn't want to be fixed. It simply wants to be seen and heard. The soul is like a wild animal, tough, resilient, and shy. When we go crashing through the woods, shouting for it to come out so we can help it, the soul will stay in hiding. But if we are willing to sit quietly and wait for a while, the soul may show itself. I wonder when the last time was that you sat still enough to wait quietly and have a deep conversation with your soul. Because that seems like quite an important thing for those of us who are called to be ministers of Christ, to be ministers of his words, to minister to other people, both to their souls and to all that they are. That we tend to our own soul, our own spiritual life, our own emotional well-being, the person that we are, because you can't really separate us all up into bits. One of the things that I'm doing as part of my spiritual direction course right now, in fact, is we have to do the 18th annotation of the Ignatian exercises. And if you don't know what that is, I didn't either until quite recently. And I'm sure that most of you might have heard of Ignatius of Loyola, and the founder of the Jesuits, who wrote these exercises that help people to draw near to God. And it's a version of that that you can do in theory during your normal, everyday, mad life. And really it's just reading scripture and reflecting and prayer and speaking with God, but in a slightly less cerebral way than we might do, sort of more from the heart. And so every day, and I'd love to tell you that I've been perfect at this, but I really haven't most days, it just starts by stilling yourself down and being aware that God's gaze is turned towards you. I mean, there's frankly worse ways of starting your day. Of just reminding yourself that God is looking at you with love. So easy, isn't it, to start our day with this? And there's a few options there. You can do what I've done so many occasions. You look at the emails and then you think, I shouldn't have looked at the emails, because there's the one that pierces your heart as you read it, and the one that annoys you because you think, I've got to find somebody else to do that now. And then there's just the boring ones. And you can start your day with that. Or you can start the day with the news app. Well, that's another cheery way to start your day, isn't it? Or you can just get your kids somehow out the door and you get yourself out the door and you pile into whatever's the first thing on your to-do list. You fight with the traffic and you try not to get too angry with people, or the sheep in my case. And then some way parts through the day you think, oh yeah, God, yeah, I remember him, yeah. You know, it just is starting with a stillness that says, here we are. Here I am in your presence, and here you are. And you're looking towards me, and boy, that's an amazing start to the day. When I do spiritual direction with people, we start, after we've done a bit of chitter-chatter, we start with a period of silence. And I pray for them, briefly. More often than not, they're in floods of tears before I haven't done or said anything at all, which is generally the best way. I just like, I so needed that. I so needed that moment of stillness. I so needed to remind myself that God is present to me. That's the first bit. If you manage to get through the first bit. The second bit is this: how do you come? How do you come? And sometimes I'm expectant, excited, hopeful. Sometimes I just feel absolutely knackered and weary, exhausted, anxious about the day ahead, frustrated. But I get to just put it down, how I am. And the next question is this: what do you desire? What do you desire when you come into God's presence with all your stuff? What do you desire from God? More often than not, He just meets me exactly at that point, through the scripture that I read, through the thoughts that I have. Parker Palmer also said this: a leader is a person who must take special responsibility for what's going on inside him or herself, inside his or her consciousness, lest the art of leadership create more harm than good. My friends, I think we've seen all too much of that in these past couple of years. People who haven't, for whatever reason, taken special responsibility for what's going inside themselves. And actually their leadership has created more harm than good. No one else can be responsible for you. You can be in as many accountability groups as you like, but if you are not accountable for yourself before God, no one else can do that bit for you. We need to take special responsibility for ourselves, for answering that question to the Lord: where are you? Rebecca Haley Barton, who writes amazing stuff, says this: taking responsibility for oneself may well be more demanding than taking responsibility for a congregation or organisation. Yeah. I mean, I quite know how to lead churches and people, and I get home and I have an argument with my husband about something stupid, because kind of that's how we are, isn't it? We need to look after ourselves. I'm not going to talk about this really, but we're on two journeys, aren't we? The outward journey, which is the bit where we get to say, hello, my name is Lisa, I work as part of the national team of the Baptist Union of Scotland, and you might be vaguely impressed with 2 minutes. And then there's the inward one, and that's frankly the real one. The other stuff, it doesn't really matter that much. It's the inward one. What's going on? And I would like to say that for the last couple of years, COVID was there. After that, a mixture of some brave changes. I only ever move when it's over 250 miles. You'll have noticed that from my CV, so I'll be off the top next time. Some really big changes. Our kids both leaving home at the same time. Some really different cultural and ecclesiological world that I now inhabit compared to where I've been. But primarily, my commitment to my own personal discipleship and walking with Jesus, this has probably been the most significant period of time in my walking with Jesus that I can remember in recent decades. That's not because I've fallen off any place along the way, but just that I've paid attention to the inward journey of what God is doing, to the changes that might still be able to occur in my character, might still be able to occur in the way that I react to circumstances and to people, that I might actually be able to change from one degree of glory into another one. Hey, that would be fun, wouldn't it? Less polishing to do when I get to heaven. But it's still possible that we can change, that we can be changed, that we can be growing more and more into the likeness of Jesus, because that's what we're made for. So I want to ask you a question as we kind of round up, I suppose. And it's a simple one. What is God's invitation to you today? What's God's invitation to you today? Maybe it's to notice your fig leaves, to notice the protective strategies that you have developed, probably just to cope, just to survive, perhaps because you've got hurt. To notice those things. Maybe it's an invitation to embrace vulnerability and to be brave in that. To come to God and say, look, can we talk about these things together? Because I think that now would be the time for us to talk about these things. Maybe it's a moment of just walking barefoot in the garden. I mean, apparently it's going to be snow, so maybe you don't actually literally do that. But something about, you can still wrap up warm, right? Go outside. Just be outside. And talk with him. Walk with him. Listen to him. Ask him stuff. What is the invitation of God for you today? I'm going to suggest that we just take a few moments. I know that silence isn't always easy for everybody, and silence can feel longer than it actually is. But I think that we should do that right now. So at the very least you have a few moments just to ask God that question and to start to allow yourself to be ready to hear what he might want to say to you. So I'm going to pray, and then I'm just going to leave it quiet. Lord, I thank you that you love us so, so much. Thank you that you come to find us, that you seek us out. Thank you that you are so patient with us, so gentle and kind towards us. That you tenderly invite us to draw close to you. And Lord, I pray that even in these moments, you would help us to listen to your invitation to us in the deep spaces of our lives and our hearts. I pray that you give us courage not to hide, not to protect ourselves from your gaze, but to come into the presence of the one who loves us more than any other and who knows us. May we simply say to you, here I am, Lord. I'm here.